Okay, guys, let's talk about what happened in Portland. A story that we know is simple. Three men confronted a lunatic who was harassing a couple of young women on the train, one of them a Muslim woman wearing a hijab. Minutes later, two of them had been stabbed to death, and one of them had been seriously wounded. Predictably, the stabbing victims were lauded across the world, and the word hero was being tossed around like condoms in a cat house. Naturally, being of red pill mentality and a men's advocate, I'm wary of the word hero, mainly because it is so often written on epitaphs and because it is so frequently used to manage grief, a way for loved ones to figure out how to live with a senseless tragedy. And it is not that I would begrudge them that simple refuge. If believing that a dead son or father or brother gave his life in an act of heroism helps assuage a devastating loss, then I can't fault families for clinging to it. But on a wider social level, just slapping a sticker that says hero on a coffin and spruiking mindlessly about gallantry is a little less functional. A good bit less, actually. After the incident in Portland, Twitter lit up with activity about it, including this tweet. For those of you just listening, I responded to a tweet lauding the two men who died with the following. Two more good men killed by chivalry. Let this be a lesson to your sons. I tweeted that over 24 hours ago, and the butthurt reactions to it are still rolling in. The Real Men Gynotrad Brigade showed up early and with gusto. They were accompanied by feminists who were trying to outdo the Gynotrads on being righteously indignant about what I said. There was even an MRA who chimed in, as some MRAs do, with instructions on what I should and should not say because, reasons. So here I am, witnessing a virtual slut walk of traditional men, feminist women, and a quasi-MRA bringing up the rear, all chiding me about being a coward, or worse, a man who doesn't care about women. With enough demands for male gallantry and sacrifice to make Christina Hoff Sommers smile in approval, I've been treated to the full range of socially demanded expectations of men, and likewise, women's immunity from said obligations. Now, it would be easy, even entertaining, to wipe the spittle off the tweets and respond to them directly for this talk, but I have a better idea. Why don't we look what happened on that train in Portland and see if I'm right or if I'm wrong? According to the news reports and witness statements linked in the low bar, what happened seems clear. I do want to issue the caveat, though, that the word seems is important. I say that because recently I gave Alexander Kolpakov credit for the possibility that he suffered combat-related PTSD after murdering his skeptic feminist co-host. Turns out he never deployed. He was a much more garden-variety murderer. Anyway, back to Portland. The news reports say that the madman, whose name does not merit repeating, confronted two young women and started berating them with ethnic insults. The women reportedly retreated to the back of the train while at least one of the stabbing victims confronted the madman, where arguing and ultimately deadly violence occurred. There is nothing in any of the reports I read, and I read several, that indicated that the killer was in pursuit of the two women to the back of the train. Nothing, in fact, that indicated there was any physical threat to those women at all. To put a fine point on it, there was no violence till the so-called heroes intervened. And so let's talk about that intervention, because in my mind, that's where the rubber meets the road. One CNN report linked in the low bar stated that the victims approached the killer and tried to calm him down. It appears that this is not entirely true. One of the women, Destiny Mangum, gave the following account to CNN in another report. Then a stranger intervened, she said, telling the man that he, and quoting here, can't disrespect these young ladies like that, unquote. Then they all just started arguing, she said. Now, think about that for a moment. The man was clearly agitated and mentally unstable. His original targets, the women, wisely moved away and gave him a wide berth. One of the men, however, according to Mangum, stepped in and told the killer that he, and I'm quoting again, can't disrespect these young ladies like that. Then the violence happened. Now, I want to point out, however, briefly, that she did not quote the man as saying that you can't assault these young ladies like that you can't threaten these young ladies like that you can't rape these young ladies like that. It was you can't disrespect these young ladies like that. At this point, one of the stabbing victims was reacting to two women being disrespected. For that, he gave his life, and so did one other man. I say that because it's very important here to establish that these men didn't step up to protect anyone from anything but the hateful ranting of an asshole. They died protecting two women from harsh words. And for that, we have the entire Western world heaping praise on them. Posthumously, of course. And there's another point here that can't be ignored. I've worked in many psychiatric facilities and in one correctional facility. In that work, it was routinely expected that I was able to have a calming effect on agitated and often violence-prone people. It was quite a challenge at times. One thing I can tell you, though, both from extensive experience and from fundamental common sense, if you want to calm an agitated person down, you won't get the job done by moving into their space and telling them they just can't insult people. Matter of fact, I can pretty much assure you that the effect of this approach will pretty much define the opposite of calming. Stepping up to an irrationally angry, verbally abusive stranger and telling them that they just can't insult the little ladies isn't the act of someone intent on diffusing a tense situation. It's the showboating of a white knight who probably doesn't have a real clue about what exactly is motivating him to act so mindlessly. I know this is where the decency police come in a Twitter rage, I bet, aghast that I could come to such a conclusion. This is where the people on Twitter challenged my manhood, called me a coward and a few other choice names, and even asked me if my mother had ever loved me. All because I came to a conclusion based on the evidence, instead of switching into hero worship mode and encouraging all men to find honor in this kind of death. Sorry, but I'm not buying it for a second. Those two men had families, people who loved them. And being men, they very likely had people counting on them, needing them, who will now never be able to count on them for anything again. Because you just can't insult these young ladies. Call me a coward if you want. Question my manhood. I don't care. I've been beyond caring about that sort of thing for a long time now. And besides, if you ask me, the hero worshippers are the only real cowards in this picture. If I've learned one thing about needless deaths like this, is that it brings the decency brigade right out of the shadows every time. They crow about the mindless heroics of dead boys and urge more boys to emulate the fatally stupid antics of modern chivalry. People like this are always putting young men who give their life for nothing on pedestals right where they can admire them, as long as someone else is doing the dying, as long as they're providing a real-life Rambo movie for someone else's vicarious enjoyment. Every time I see it happen, I want nothing more than to change the channel. This movie always ends the same way. All I can hope for is that a few more people each time will see through the haze of hero worship and let that be a lesson for their sons.